Luke chapter 15. Last week, we started and read through the beginning of the parable of what's been known as the prodigal son. We suggested this past week, and even the Bible would suggest that that's probably not the best title because there's really three very strong characters in here, and it only highlights one part of that story. In this, we see a young man in open rebellion and arrogance making some terribly reckless decisions that shame his family, that dishonor everyone around him, and he takes it, leaves to a foreign country, squanders the wealth that he had, and it leaves him desperate, starving because of a famine, and dying in total shame. He decides to return to his father. He comes to his senses, Luke 15 says, and he hopes to be brought on just as a hired hand, just to be provided for. But in an unprecedented, unimaginable act, the father receives him back fully with complete love and restoration, and makes him a son again with all the rights and privileges of not only being his son, but of being noble. I mean, it seems like a wasteful decision when you consider it. But the father loves him that much and will not have anything less than full restoration of his son. And he celebrates him. We also saw that consistent last week. There's a celebration of what is lost being found with a massive feast and the best food, the fattened calf. You only had calf and really meat on the best occasions. And he took the time to prepare the best food for his son that was lost. And then we compared how that went into our own lives and how God uses this parable to demonstrate what he has done for each and every one of us. But today we're going to focus in on the other character. The other character in this story that we haven't had a lot of experience with yet is the older brother. And the older brother kind of paints really what I think is actually the point of the parable, and really demonstrates why Jesus was teaching this. He wasn't just teaching about his salvation for those that were lost and were rebellious. He was teaching about those that were lost and rebellious and were really close to him. And that's what we're going to see today in this. And we'll also see in here a shocking ending to this story with a twist that shows how God demonstrates truth and the great message of grace that is demonstrated for all sinners. So I want to invite you to pray with me, and we'll begin our time together. Father, I thank you for this wonderful opportunity we have to come together, to worship you, to sing songs about you, and to hear from your word. I ask this morning that this word would fall on good soil in our hearts, that where there is conviction, that it would be brought, that it wouldn't be turned to guilt, but rather to change. And I ask for anyone out here this morning that is warring or struggling, be it in sin, or be it especially this morning as we address pride. I ask that you would just be working in each and every one of our hearts to bring about what you desire in us. And we give you the praise in your name. Amen. So, as I said last week, this parable was addressed to a group of listeners. You had a mixed audience there of sinful, rebellious, drunkard people. You had tax collectors, who we said was a special breed of evil. We don't carry that over today, by the way. And you have a special breed of people known as the Pharisees. These were the spiritual leaders, and the Pharisees were also the political party of the land. They were one of the most powerful, influential people that used the laws of Moses, the laws of God, added to them to create a strong political superpower. That was their idea, was to obtain power and position within this by following ridiculous rules. You can only walk so many steps on the Sabbath. You can't rescue your animal that you rely on for income on the Sabbath. You have to dress this way. You have to talk this way. You have to look this way. You had to pray out loud in public. You had to do these things to show everyone you were incredible. You were incredible. That's what they were looking for. And that is what they came to see here. It was a great honor to be a Pharisee. And people, you were kind of viewed as the elite, the untouchable. And what we see here at the beginning of chapter 15, if you read that, it just says they grumbled against Jesus. noting that he eats and talks with sinners and tax collectors, which was far underneath them. They had to clean up their act before they were even considered to be talked to. And Jesus responds with 3 parables, and we went through those last week. If you missed that, you can listen online to that message. We went through those parables and showed how something lost was found and how it was celebrated. And that's crucial. That's key as we look at this. And then they listened to this story of the prodigal son, and you would have probably seen a whole mixed group of emotions and reactions to this story. But the Pharisees, you could probably get what they were going with this. They would have shaken their heads in total disgust at the disrespect the younger son gave to the father. They would nod in approval at all the hardships he came into. Like, that's right. That's what you deserve for doing that. They would have been completely appalled, wringing their hands at the thought of one of them being in a pigsty. There's no way anyone would take him now. And then they would have been, surprised that the son would even think of going home, because who would accept such a wicked person? But then everything changed suddenly, and this is where we're going to start this morning, is when Jesus talks about the father coming and running towards the son, which was unthinkable to them. Why would the one upright moral person in the story shame himself? That doesn't fit into the picture here. That doesn't work with my worldview, Jesus. And he does this to love his son. This is unthinkable, and this is just the beginning, I would suggest, of the bombshell Jesus is about to throw into the middle of the Pharisees' mindset and worldview, and what I think would ultimately set the stage for what we know would happen later. So if you are in Luke chapter 15, I'd like to start this morning in verse 25. Verse 25. Now his older son, this is the son of the father, was in the field. And as he came and drew near to the house, he heard music and dancing. And he called one of the servants and asked what these things meant. And he said to him, "Your brother has come, and your father has killed the fattened calf, because he has received him back safe and sound." But he was angry and refused to go in. His father came out and entreated him, but he answered his father, "Look, these many years I have served you. I have never disobeyed your command, yet you never gave me a young goat that I might celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours came, who devoured your property with prostitutes, you killed the fattened calf for him." And he said to him, "Son, you are always with me, and all that is mine is yours. It was fitting to celebrate and be glad, for this your brother was dead and is now alive. He was lost and is now found." So we see here the introduction of the older brother. He is finally introduced. But it would have been very peculiar for a listener at that time when they heard this to go, "Oh yeah, there was an older brother. Where's he been this whole time?" That's a great question. Why hasn't he been around up until this point? Here's why I'm saying this. At this time, the oldest son was responsible for carrying on the family title, legacy, and resources to the next generation. He was the future of keeping that. That's why the oldest son always received the double portion. He needed the most resources and the most land and the most power to keep everything going and to expand upon that. It wasn't just to keep it where it was, but to grow with it. And so he needed the most resources to do that. And part of his responsibilities, really the biggest responsibility he had, frankly, was to oversee the family. Because the family, intact, was an honor and was what would give them the edge on this. So here we go. This is probably one of the most important statements I can give you this morning. It was the responsibility of the older brother to oversee the family and even take care of any of the problems. If I were teaching a college class, I would tell the students, write that down. It will be on the test. Because this was one of his biggest jobs, was to oversee and protect the the family. He was to be the right hand of the father, helping and assisting him with whatever needed to be done, be that administration of some of the details around the place, whether it was the property, the finances, or especially family matters. That was not the father's job. That was the older brother's job. And yet, what you see here in the beginning of this parable, if the younger brother was wandering off, and he was being outrightly disrespectful to his father, the person to intervene should have been the older brother. Where is he? Or the younger brother shames the family by squandering the wealth. That was a shame to the family. Where's the older brother? I mean, if the older brother couldn't at least reason with him, at least all he could have done was buy it back. It was like, here, I'll give you the money. Just we just need to keep this intact. I'll pay you whatever you want for this. We can't have the title ruined. That would have been the impersonal thing to do. The older brother isn't there. You don't see that. He's missing in action. In fact, the older brother goes to a far country and squanders everything and totally dishonors everything that they are. You don't see the older brother going on a trip to go get him and at least try to reason with him. Nothing. Zero. No mention of him until now. Because the older brother was to have the heart of the father. He was to have the heart that would keep the family together and would keep things going and would seek to keep everything running. And if someone got off track, he was supposed to go get him. That was his job. Not there. Not there. He's completely indifferent. And that's why I believe the Bible suggests this morning that this older brother is just as lost and rebellious as his younger brother. He just chose to stay and appear loyal. So in some ways, the younger brother's the more outward, rebellious one. The older brother's more diabolical. He's a little more behind the scenes about it. And what you see in here is a complete indifference towards his father, his name being squandered, and to his younger brother who's about to destroy his life and potentially kill himself. Friends, today in the church, we need older brothers who oversee the family. We need people who watch out for younger brothers who are struggling and are trying to wander. And you need to go get with them. You need to get in their face a little bit and say, where are you going? You know this is not how this goes. You're bringing dishonor to God. You don't do this. This is not how we act. And it can be done gently, it can be done lovingly, it can be done kindly, but that's what the church needs, are older brothers who can intervene like this. Not like what you see here, where they're completely out of the picture. Completely out of the picture. And we're actually going to see more how out of the picture this older brother was. It's all too easy for us to be like him. He is callous, he is self-centered, but God has a plan for those people too. Read with me again in verse 25, if you would. His older brother was in the field, or the older son, was in the field. And as he came and drew near to the house, he heard music and dancing. Now, if the older brother would have been out managing servants in a field, and if he was managing them the way he managed his family, it probably was pretty bad management. Or probably was at least pretty cruel, because what you can see here is this is not a kind individual. And this also gives you a picture of how big and how momentous this family's wealth was. If he is that far away, he can't hear a party going on. He's coming from several miles away. This is an incredible amount of wealth these people have. And he comes in from the fields, and he hears music and dancing. Like that of a large party. Now, to make the situation just a little more awkward, the party planner in the family, guess whose job that was? The older brother. So the older brother comes in, and there's a party going on that he didn't know about. And probably he would have been at least a little perplexed as to why this would happen. It was seen as a menial and lesser task for the father to do this job. But the father takes the whole responsibility on, and guess what? You never see here where the father goes, I'm going to include the older brother in this. He doesn't do that. I think that's because this is just a little bit of a glimpse into how their relationship is. The father knows where his son is. He knows how distant and rebellious he is, even though he appears loyal. He sees it. And I would suggest to you pretty simply this, that the father doesn't want a wet blanket on his party. He doesn't need someone coming in and throwing fits and arguing and getting in the way of this celebration. So he just throws the party, and the older brother comes along. They don't have a good relationship at all. And what you see here is what this son's response is to this. Verse 26 and 27. He called to one of the servants and asked what these things meant. This is, scholars say this is probably one of the most cordial and kind translations of this verse. Literally translated, this is what it says. He called to a little boy. This translation here for servant is actually that of a little boy, and demanded harshly an explanation. So he comes in, and the person he picks is a little kid. Probably because he feels superior to that little kid. Why else would you go to a little kid to ask for the information? You don't go ask Colton in my house what's going on. He's going to tell you whatever's happening on his favorite TV show. He's going to tell you what his favorite food is. He's going to tell you about his family, but you do not usually go to them for the best information unless you want to feel something, and in this case, I would suggest he wants to feel power. He wants to feel like he's got something there. So it's like, hey, kid, tell me what's going on. Intimidating him. And this boy says to him, your brother came back? Your father has killed the fattened calf because he received him back safe and sound. What? What? I thought he was dead. Are you serious? He came back? And then not only this, his father received him back. Now, I want to play devil's advocate here with you for a minute. I know it's not a great place to be for a pastor, but I just want to play with that for a second here, because I want you to get what's in his mind. He took a third of the estate and everything that there was and squandered it. The father receives him back and gives him full status. Where did that money come from? The older brother. That was split. That was split between him. How many of you, just raise your hand, how many of you would say that's not fair? That's not fair. How many of you have siblings? You would go, oh, that's definitely not fair. My sister's not here, but I can tell you that would not have gone over well if my parents had done that to me. I'm not going to lie to you. I understand a bit of the frustration here with the older brother. I'm not coming out and outwardly condemning him right away on this. I get this, because this means he has to, the favorite word we're teaching Colton right now, share. He has to have a part of this. That is ridiculous. But that, my friends, is the love of God that brings everyone in and treats them all as loved sons without a hierarchy and without a position. And that was something the Pharisees could not get through their minds, was that there was an unequal treatment. They loved that unequal treatment. But that's not how it was. He brings them in and gives them this. So now he's expected to do this. So, being the mature individual he is, he stands outside and pouts. And he tries to just probably make his verbal case to anyone and everyone who will listen to him. And this news makes the ears of the father who's inside. The older son's outside saying, why are we celebrating this fool? Frankly, what fool celebrates another fool? Probably. And the father comes out to him, and it says, entreats him. It literally means he pled with him. Come inside, join the celebration, and now we see where the older brother truly is in verse 28. is what it says. His father came out and entreated him, but he answered his father, "Look." It's like, look, see this? I mean, you hear the disrespect in here? Look, these many years I have served you, and I have never disobeyed your command, yet you never gave me a young goat that I may celebrate with my friends. Do you hear? I, me, my, me, now. Give it to me. I've done this. I've earned this, and you did not celebrate me. And then, I love this, verse 30. Here, listen to this part. But when this son of yours came, his brother, by the way, who has devoured your property with prostitutes, you killed the fattened calf for him. He's calling his father on the rug for this and says, you're doing this. I demand to know why you are doing this. And this is unbelievable. Here's my case why. Do you hear the rebellion and pride just come surging out of this guy? He is labored, I mean this, labored to appear upright and holy and righteous, but the cancer of his pride is raging within him, and it's finally starting to surface what his heart truly is. Guess what? This was a Pharisee, folks. They spent all of their energy and all of their time appearing upright, holy, worthy of praise, but they were so wicked and so consumed with themselves, nothing else would do. This is hypocrisy revealed. This is hypocrisy, where they have tried everything they can to present themselves as the best, when in fact nothing could be further from the truth. I was thinking about this, and I recalled a kind of an interesting story. When I was in college, I went to Mansfield University and was involved in several different performing groups there. One of them, it wasn't my favorite group, but I actually did an opera with a group of people. I didn't have a large role in it, but I got to sit in, and it was a fairly large time commitment. So I sat through a lot of rehearsals, not actually doing anything, just watching people. And I got to watch a lot of the directors coach these people. And our college president at the time, her name was Maravine Leshke. She was an amazing, amazing woman. She just was one of those people that if you saw her walking around campus, she would come up, and she would come up and give you this big hug, and you probably had never met her before. And you just loved her, like, oh my gosh, I want to be your friend. And she was great like that. Just amazing. Dr. Leshke actually was a professional actress before she got into administration, sharing the stage with people like Carol Burnett, for example. Very, very good at what she did. And she taught theater for many years. And one night, our group was privileged to actually have her come in and coach a rehearsal. We were all really excited about this. And it only got better once she started. She was incredible. She was giving these great directions that, it just made it all work, and it really invigorated us. And this one character in the story, he was the comical relief of the play. He was an older man that was consistently intoxicated. And I'm going somewhere with this, don't worry. The actor that was playing him had a really hard time trying to convey to the audience that he was, in fact, intoxicated. And the point of the story was the intoxicated person had seen something scandalous go down, and he was the only witness to what was happening. And so it was supposed to be this really hilarious story, but he was having a very difficult time conveying it. And she stopped him, went up on stage with him, and she said, look, the problem here is you're trying to appear intoxicated, when in fact you really need to actually appear a little too normal. Because she said someone who's inebriated is trying to convince other people that they're still okay and that they're still normal. So she goes, you need to look at what everybody else is doing and try to copy it just a little too well. And so that's what we did. It was amazing to watch the transformation as this guy was able to take this. And you could tell he was trying to appear normal. Everything he was saying was normal. The content was good, but he wasn't right. Something was wrong. Something was controlling him. Something had made him what he was not trying to be. That's hypocrisy. Trying to do everything perfect, everything right, appearing to be the best, when in fact you are completely intoxicated with sin. That is what hypocrisy is. They are so consumed with themselves, putting on this front, and are good at it. But in the background, they are completely 100% lost, hopeless, and completely stuck in sin. That is, and Jesus points this out to them as a matter of foolishness. And he says, this is almost the idea of you appear like you're normal, like everything is good, but you are clearly drunk on yourself. You are consumed with yourself. And as I thought about that, I went, what a beautiful, beautiful picture, and yet what a horrible picture. Because that is what they were doing. They were appearing righteous to convince everyone else and trying to convince themselves, but their attitude and their character are completely self-righteous. So what you see here is this older brother finally reveals where he is. He finally reveals where he is. He's followed all the rules. He's done everything right, but here's his heart. Look, these many years I have served you. I have never disobeyed your command, and yet you never gave me a young goat that I might celebrate with my friends. I have done this, I've done this, I've done this. I have earned this, and you owe me. You owe me. If you want a couple of chapters to the right in Luke 18, and if you would like to turn, I'll just read this briefly to you. It starts in verse 10. We see here of a story of a Pharisee in a temple. It says this: 2 men went up into the temple to pray. One was a Pharisee, and the other one was a tax collector. Okay, so the morally upright and the scum of the earth. The Pharisee, standing by himself, in other words, he's positioning himself right in the front so everybody can see him by himself, prayed this way: God, I thank you that I am not like other men, the extortioners, the unjust, the adulterers, or even like this tax collector. Nice. I fast twice a week, and I give tithes of all that I get. I make my case. I plead out my excellence. I am perfect, and I have earned everything. Now, what they claim is that they've earned everything. They've actually been given out of grace. Because let me ask you a really, really blunt question. Everything the son was trying to earn whose was it? It was his father's. The only right he had to his father's wealth and title and position was the fact that his father gave it to him. That's the idea here of parading your excellence and building your case for yourself to show God you've earned it. That's how foolish it really is. Because this Pharisee stands in there and says, I've done all these good things, using the breath that God gives him, using the heartbeat that he has, using all of the things around him, all the means to do this, to tell God he's earned it. No, he hasn't earned anything. And let's go back, if you would, to Luke chapter 15. Here's what he says. Oh, this is a convicting part of Scripture. He points out that his father never acknowledged this, and here we actually find out what the son really wanted: a celebration with his friends. And he even uses the comparison: you didn't give me a young goat. My older brother, who's been a complete fool, gets a fattened calf. I just want a goat. You didn't even give me that. I want this to celebrate with my friends. Here his chief desire is actually to celebrate apart from his father. In the celebration on the guest list, his younger brother and his father didn't make it. And yet everything that's here is of the Father. Here's the irony of this that we actually saw at the beginning of the parable with the younger brother, with his statements saying, give me my share of the inheritance. Translation, wish you were dead. You didn't give me this so I could celebrate my friends at a party to which you are not invited. Dad, I wish you weren't here. I wish you weren't around. He wants to enjoy all the riches, all the power, all the position, and doesn't realize that those riches are because of the Father and are to be celebrated with the Father. Life and blessing do not exist without the giver. Who are we to disagree with what the giver gives and the parameters he puts on it? Yet, I would suggest to you, for us, some of us who are the closest to God may in fact be some of the furthest away from him, because we think we can earn it. John MacArthur says this beautifully. The Pharisees' chief error lay in their belief that they did deserve God's favor. They thought they deserved it because they had done everything right. They had earned their way. They had played the game well. And they could set the rules because they were just a little better than everybody else. And that was the game. We had to just get a little bit better and a little bit better. Let me take a moment here. I'm just going to read through a couple of scriptures to you to show what God has to say about this. Titus 3:5, not by works of righteousness which we have done, but according to his mercy he saved us. Not by works. Ephesians 2, if you want a real chapter that's going to challenge somebody who thinks they can earn it, read through Ephesians 2. You won't make it through 10 verses before you're completely shut down. Here's what it says, that the grace of God has actually strategically set itself up against good works. You can't earn it. No one can boast, because when men boast in their righteousness, what it means is that they think that somehow their righteousness is of them. Your righteousness isn't of you. There is none righteous, no, not one. No, not one. You cannot make yourself righteous before God. You must be reminded that your righteousness is, as Paul says, filthy rags. It's useless. Pride in our hearts will persuade us that our work is what we need to do and that our work is what determines our worth. That's why people who have screwed up so significantly feel like they'll never get back to God, because what they have done has qualified them as worthless. And that's why those who think they have worked hard and have had great success with that think that's why they're valuable. But that's not what it is. They list this list of works. You see the Pharisee list a list of works. The older brother lists his works. He's got his pedigree out. Here's why I'm valuable. The Apostle Paul lays out a pedigree too in Philippians 3. Here's what he says. If anyone else thinks he has reason for confidence in the flesh, I have more. I was circumcised on the 8th day of the people of Israel, of the tribe of Benjamin. I am a Hebrew of Hebrews. As to the law, a Pharisee. As to zeal, I was a persecutor of the church. And as to righteousness under the law, blameless. Paul says, you think you've got a great list? I've got the best one out there. And he does, actually. He has an incredible list. And if you were looking in Philippians 3, you would think, wow, Paul's very arrogant. But then read verse 7 and it says this, whatever gain I had, I counted as loss for the sake of Christ. Indeed, I count everything as loss because of the surpassing worth of knowing Christ Jesus, my Lord. Many people have tried to argue that Paul is probably the best of us, one of the most godly men, and yet he says, I have fallen short. He agrees with God. His gain was loss. He did not have what was needed to save him and make him work, because let me tell you this, when it comes to works, the only work that matters is what Jesus Christ did on the cross. That's the only work that matters. All of us are going to struggle with this pride, though, especially if you are brought in and are a believer. You're going to struggle with pride, and probably for many of us, this is actually the Achilles heel of our soul. We're going to earn it. I'm going to get there, and I'm not going to let it go. But that's not what the Scripture teaches here. Scripture here is very, very clear. James says here, God opposes the proud and gives grace to the humble. We like the part where it says he gives grace to the humble. We're not always attuned to the part where he opposes the proud. Do you hear that? The Almighty God, the God we just sang about, and behold our God, he is against you if you're proud. Whew. Luke 18, this one is stunning. That Pharisee who paraded his righteousness before him, here's what the verse says. The tax collector who couldn't even look up at heaven just says, forgive me, I'm a sinner. And here's how that ends. The tax collector went away justified. The Pharisee did not. That Pharisee went away wicked and an abomination to God. James encourages us to humble ourselves and he will lift us up. Psalm says, a broken and contrite heart God will not despise. It is pleasing to him. You read, humble yourself in the sight of the Lord and he will lift you up. What is God looking for here? He's looking for humility. And your pride and your works and everything you want to parade out is actually going to be an enemy to you in that. You can't bring that. What you have to bring is yourself to the reality that you can't earn it at all. That everything you have is because of God and because of what he has given you. So just a quick test here. How do we know that we're prideful? How do we know if that's me? I don't want to be opposed to God. How do I see this? Well, I would suggest this. If you can't delight in what God delights in, you're prideful. If you see in this story, the father delights in loving a lost son, and the older son can't have any part of that. And that's the same thing for you. If you don't delight in what God delights in, you're prideful. You're too full of yourself. Number two, I would suggest you lack joy. You have no joy in your life. And probably it's just because things didn't go the way I wanted to, and I'm the most important one. I am the one that everything good is supposed to happen to. You should be throwing celebrations for me. I'm that awesome. And what this is saying here is no. You should God is looking to celebrate the lost, the worthless ones he's celebrating. He takes joy in that. If your only joy in life is in what you've done and how great you are, you're prideful. If you list off reasons to God and to others and to yourself probably mostly why you're doing great spiritually, if you list off all the great things you are doing, you're full of pride. You're sitting going, God, I went to church every Sunday last year. I didn't miss communion. I didn't miss a meeting. I went to youth group. I went to children's church. I did all of this. I sold my car off for you. I did all of these other things. I now live out on the streets for you. I do all this stuff for you. That's great, but it's not going to save you at all. And if that's what you're saying, all that you've done, you're full of pride. Because a true reconciled believer does not look at what they've done. They look at what God's done. They look at what God's done. So the ultimate test is, are you prideful? What are you thinking about? What consumes your mind? Are you consumed about what you've done? Are you consumed about how successful you've been? Are you consumed about how much you've failed? That can be a form of pride too. I am such a screw up. You can be so consumed with you. Pride says you are the center. Jesus Christ says, I am God. Worship me. But let's get back to our story here. Let's go to verse 30 in Luke chapter 15. He says to his father, when the son of yours came, who has devoured your property with prostitutes, you killed the fattened calf for him. So you hear that? This son of yours? He is so emotionally disconnected and despising of his family, which was his biggest job, by the way. His biggest job was to care for the family, that he even speaks to his father as a peer, probably more like a superior. He calls his father out for doing this. And this older brother is so consumed with the speck in his father's eye and the speck in his younger brother's eye, he can't see the massive log in the other eye of his. But what you see here, this older brother is terrible. But the father's about ready to offer a rescue to him as well. So he says, "Son, you are always with me, and all that is mine is yours." The formal word for son as a proper title is used several times throughout this passage, but this is actually a different word. This is actually translated means my little baby. This is like, it's an affectionate term. You're always with me. All that is mine is yours. He just responded to that celebration comment. It's almost to say, did I withhold something from you? All that is mine is yours. That goat you want to celebrate, it's yours. Those friends that you have, they're yours. All these things are yours. Everything that I have is yours. What grace that everything that God has, He has given to us. Everything valuable that He has bestowed upon us is a gift of Him, and He is always with us. He has His presence with us. He exposes this for Him. And when His Son is being so disrespectful and so spiteful and so arrogant, He reminds him of his place, and his place is with Him. The Father hasn't rejected the older brother either. And if you are His child, even in arrogance, God has not rejected you, even though you are currently maybe even rejecting Him. All that is the Father is yours. But the older son chose to forego the joy of having everything the Father has for earned wages. It's foolish, but it's all too common among Pharisees and believers. And then he explains, verse 32, "It was fitting to celebrate and be glad, for this your brother was dead and is alive, and he was lost and was now found." That it just reveals to both sons He loves and delights in restoring them where they are, be that in a bar room or be it in a church pew. He loves it. He takes joy in it. And here is probably, if you're familiar with the story, what is the most frustrating part. There's no ending. We didn't find out how the story wrapped up. And it's frustrating to you and I. It would have been even more frustrating to them because they were a very comfortable society when it came to storytelling. They were experts at it. And this story, like most stories, has a format. I don't want to bore you with a lot of details here, but what you see here is actually two stories combined into one story with an overarching theme. You have the younger brother, you have his mess up, you have his rebellion, he leaves, realizes what he's done, he goes back, he is loved and the Father restores him. That's a complete story. We're going to take that same thing and apply it here to the older brother. The older brother messes up, there's a rebellion, tries to state his case and explain that. The Father tries to rescue him, but we're left off with here what happened. Were they restored? And this was, to a Jewish listener, an incomplete story. It was completely incomplete, going, where's the ending? I want to know where the ending is. How's this supposed to wrap up, Jesus? And He doesn't do that. He leaves it there. And I would suggest for a couple of reasons here. Probably most importantly is this. He says to the listener and to the Pharisees, because the Pharisees' character is the older brother, he says to them, how is this going to end? How are you going to end this? And we all have the story ending we hope would happen here. that the story ending would say something like, and the older brother fell to his knees weeping. The father loved him, and they went inside to the party together and celebrated the reconciliation. But my friends, that's not the ending the Pharisees wrote. Because 3 months from then, they would be gazing up on a piece of wood in a trash dump in Jerusalem, mocking and laughing Jesus Christ, who is suffering and dying on a cross. Here's the story ending they tried to write. And the older brother became enraged and picked up some wood and struck and killed the father. That's the story they tried to write. Because their anger and their pride demands that they, get this, be God. That's what pride demands. Pride doesn't let anyone else be God other than you. And that's what got us in trouble in Genesis. We wanted to be like God. In fact, really, we wanted to be God. And we, in our sin, and in them in their sin, all together, when God came and showed us our sin and we're exposed with that, self-righteousness has two choices. It either kills or it's killed. And they chose to kill God. They chose to get rid of it and demand to be God at that exact moment. They tried to write this story of the older brother kills him, and finally the older brother is in charge. He has it. It's his land. It's his wealth now. He can do as he wishes. And that's the ending that the Pharisees wrote. Finally, we got rid of Jesus. He is done. They had 3 days where they locked him into a tomb. They sealed it and put a guard on a dead body. And just when they think it's all okay, because in Jewish customs, 3 days and no noise from inside the tomb means it's truly dead. They actually had a superstitious belief, probably because of an accidental burial at some point, that within 3 days, if there had been nothing from inside the tomb, that body was truly dead, the spirit was departed, and it was physically impossible for anything to live. On that third morning, in the coolness and darkness, there's an earthquake, and it begins to shake the ground, and the ground begins to give way, and there's a thunderous crack of the seal and that stone beginning to move. The guards tremble in fear as they watch the glory of God emerge from the tomb of a dead man, and Jesus Christ stands before them and makes it very clear, you can't kill God. You can't kill God. Your self-righteousness is no match for me. I will be Lord over it. And these people who have been self-righteous and self-absorbed are now faced with these horrifying stories that Jesus is alive. Well, let me just tell you this. If the one you killed is alive, you're worried about retribution. You're worried about it. Now, it sounds funny to us, but in their situation, they're worried about zealous followers. They're worried for their lives here. And that was on purpose, because God exposes to them in this that when self-righteousness tries to kill God, he will instead kill it and make it clear that this. So here's the actual ending to the story. The older brother becomes enraged, strikes his father, and thinks him dead on the ground. But instead, the father rises up and says, will you come in and join the party? So that's my question to you this morning. I'm going to leave it for us to see here. Will you join the celebration of the Father? And I'm calling anyone out here in any place, be that a believer who's new or a believer who's been here for 50 years, I'm just leaving this to you this morning. Will you join the celebration? Will you set aside the foolishness of trying to earn your salvation? I'm going to invite you just to bow your head with me. You may remain seated. I want to just take a moment here and just give you the opportunity right now in the presence of God to search your heart at this moment. This is an extremely convicting passage of Scripture because no one's walking out of it perfect. You've either been a prodigal who's been outwardly rebellious, or you've probably been an older brother that's been inwardly rebellious. Maybe for you, it's the beginning. You're going, I don't even know what you're talking about, being saved. I don't know anything about that. If you have questions, you need to come talk to me. I'll walk you through that. I'd love to do that. But I'm actually going to talk more to those of us who have grown up in the church or have many years in the church. And you're realizing here this morning that the things you thought were great about yourself may in fact have been the worst things about yourself. And you're realizing that when it comes to your spiritual walk, the only one who matters is you and what you get and what you want. You realize there's been arrogance towards a younger brother or towards someone that you just can't stand, and you list your reasons to God of why you're totally better than them. But in reality, the same price that was paid for them was also paid for you. Or you just find yourself completely bogged down with things that you have done, be them good or bad, and you have tried to justify to God why you're worthy or even why you're unworthy. And what he is saying to you this morning is simple. Will you join the celebration? Will you come take part in the joy that I have taken in restoring lost sinners into loved sons and loved daughters? Will you join this morning?